Good morning, everyone. Okay, we can do better than that. Morning, everyone. Morning. Okay, that's better. Cool. So I'll be talking today about learn, reflect, and refactor. So what do I want to be when I grow up? So as a kid, I never quite knew the answer to this question. There were so many potential jobs out there. How could I ever pick out that one single thing that I'd end up doing for the rest of my life? Because that's how it worked, right? You picked out one job and you stuck with it basically until you retired or you died. So throughout my childhood, I jumped between a variety of wannabe professions, from forensic scientist to movie star, from writer to rocket scientist. And there was definitely a trend and a theme to my daydreams. Whatever I ended up doing had to be challenging and creative. So skip forward to 10 years later. I'm 18 and I'm studying computer science. Now at this point, I've decided that I want to be a developer, but I don't quite yet know what specialization or what focus or area I want to look at. But I'm pretty sure that one day, once I'm graduated and have a proper job, the main focus of my day-to-day job will be programming. I thought that the primary thing that I would be doing is writing code. So skip forward to now. I work at a company called FutureLearn, and while my title is still developer, I don't actually really write that much code anymore. And I don't think being able to code is the most important thing that I do. So currently, my responsibilities are split over 3 different roles. I'm a developer working on the FutureLearn platform and helping build stuff for our learners. I'm the evangelism lead, helping raise awareness about FutureLearn and encouraging my entire team to share what they do and what they know with other people. And I'm a line manager, where I'm responsible for the well-being and development of other developers, having one-on-ones with them and generally just supporting them and helping them. And then outside of work, I'm a blogger. I blog at missgeeky.com, where I've been doing that for the past 10 years. I'm an event organizer, organizing London meetups, like the London Ruby User Group and Thundercloud, which is all about lightning talks. And I organize bigger events, like hack days and bar camps. And I'm a speaker, giving talks at events like this. So over the years, I've pushed myself to try out different things and learn who it is that I want to be. And I've slowly come to realize that, what it is that I love doing and what it is that I'm good at. But I'm not really here to tell you my story. I want to help you figure out what your story is, what your story could be. So we are in an industry where things are always changing. We live in a time where we most probably won't have just that one career, that one single thing that you do for the rest of your life. And maybe you're listening to me and thinking, but I know I'll be a developer for the rest of my life. I won't need another career or another role, which is great for you. But do you think that you'll be programming the same language or using the same tools that you are now, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 20 years? So the number one thing that we need to learn is how to adapt. So we need to figure out what it is that we like to do to help us understand what our next role, our next career, our next technology, or our next tools will be. Because no matter what happens, things will always change, and we need to change with it. So how do we do this? How do we figure out what's next? How do we make sure we're actively changing and adapting what we want to do? And I realized I didn't really need to look that far for inspiration. There are already things that I was doing with my team on a daily basis that I could apply to myself. So I was already learning these ways to change and adapt. So as I mentioned before, I work for a company called FutureLearn, and we're a social learning platform. So we partner with universities and museums and cultural institutions all over the world to offer online courses. And we help our users learn by provoking conversation around the course material, so that learners and educators learn as much from each other as they do from the material itself. And we try to mirror this environment within our company. So we work in small multidisciplinary teams where designers, developers, and product managers all contribute to the product's direction. So learning is at the core of our company, and we are all passionate about learning from each other and from our users, and making sure that what we're building is the right thing and done in the right way. And like most Agile teams, we take the time to reflect on how we work as a team, coming together at the end of every 2 weeks and having a retrospective on how we could improve things. And as developers, we make sure we have the time to refactor our code and make it cleaner and easier to use. So for me, it was a given that I should take time to reflect with my team, and that I should take time to refactor my code. But the thing is, we can apply those same principles there to ourselves. So that's why I want to talk today about reflecting and refactoring. So it's to stop and think about how can we improve ourselves and our behaviors. Because if you don't, we risk creating the human equivalent of technical debt. So waking up one day and realizing that you don't really like the person that you've become, or wishing you had focused on different skills, different goals, different passions. So this talk is about how to create our own best practices. So how can we give ourselves that time and space to figure things out? So this talk is split in 2 separate parts. Reflect, where I'll focus on using reflection to figure out what our goals should be. And refactor, where I'll focus on how we can change our behaviors to achieve those goals. So first, reflect. So before we look at how to do reflection, I thought I'd examine a little bit more closely why we're doing it and what we want to get out of it. And a good starting point is looking at why do Agile teams do reflections in the first place. And I think there are 4 underlying reasons. So to improve how we do things, to learn from what we did before, to expose what people are thinking and feeling, and to get a common understanding. So no matter the type of reflection or retrospective, or whatever term you want to use for this, at the core, these are the reasons why we do them. And I think when we're talking about our own reflections, the underlying reasons are pretty much similar. So to improve how you do things, to learn from what you did before, to expose what you are thinking and feeling, and to understand what you want to do. So always keep these 4 things in mind whenever you're doing reflections. So it's all about discovering and refining your goals, taking the time to figure out what you want to do next, and identifying what actions you should be taking to get there. And in a way, most of us are already doing this. We already have these moments of introspection and thinking about what we want for life. When we're commuting, during breakfast or lunch, when we're getting ready for work, when we're exercising. These things, they tend to happen when we don't have to think about anything else. When we have enough spare brain power to let our minds wander and think of what if. Because the rest of the time, we're way too busy. With our jobs, with our families, with our hobbies, and only doing it during these moments of quietness, it's not really enough for most of us. It's not enough for us to actually take action and do something. So the number 1 thing about reflection, I think, is make explicit time for it. And the main way I do that is by scheduling in personal retrospectives. So this is explicit time in my calendar where all my focus is on reflecting and reflecting alone. And I think there are two different types of retrospectives, and we need to do both of them. So long term, where you think about the broader idea of what you want to do and where you'd like to go, coming up with bigger goals for yourself. And short term, where it's much more about improving and learning from recent events and coming up with actions that you could do immediately next week or the week after. So I want to look at both of these in a bit more detail. But before I do, I want you to consider some things that are relevant for both types of reflections. So number one, throw away your assumptions. So specifically your assumptions about what you think the world expects you to be. Your assumptions about what a real developer should do. Because this isn't about comparing yourself to other people. This is about being introspective and understanding what matters to you and nobody else. Number two, be kind to yourself. And I think the sentiment got touched upon yesterday already. But don't be too harsh on yourself when doing these retrospectives. And this is one thing to keep in mind. So this is the prime directive of the retrospectives. I don't quite remember the exact book from where it came from. But it's regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. So at my work, we like to remind people of this at the start of every retrospective, making sure that people remember that their team members did everything to the best of their knowledge. And the same thing you need to consider about yourself. So don't be too harsh on yourself. Number three, find a time when you are in the right mindset or headspace to do this. So I'm someone that gets anxiety quite a lot. And formerly, that anxiety would hit me exactly when I was trying to sleep. And I start thinking about all the things that I could have done differently that day, all the things that might happen to me tomorrow, going over the conversations I might have with people, and basically just coming up with all the worst case scenarios that possibly could happen, even though they're really, really unlikely. And doing that at the time when you're trying to sleep, it's not a good idea. And having an explicit retrospective, it means that when moments like this hit me, I'll write something down as a reminder and remind myself that I can deal with it tomorrow or whenever next my own retrospective is. So making sure that my headspace, my mindset is in that right place for when I want to deal with these questions, rather than doing it in the middle of the night when I'm not going to be any use anyway. Number four, don't wallow in the world of what if. Now, I love the alliteration in that sentence. So these retrospectives are meant to be helpful to you. So we all have things that we could easily spend hours and hours agonizing over. And some of the retro formats that I'll be talking about might open Pandora's box for you. And you need to keep in mind that the end result of this is figuring out what you want to do next. So going over things that might have been is only useful if it helps you come up with a plan for the future. If it isn't, don't waste time on it. Don't get too stuck in the details of what could have been. So, long-term retrospective. So I'll explain 4 different formats here that you can use when reflecting on your long-term goals. And it's completely up to you how often you need these to be. So for some people, it might be once a year. For some, it might be every quarter. For others, any time period in between. And part of this is understanding what type of person you are and what you want. So not all of these formats are going to be helpful for every single person here. Different people will need different prompts to get you thinking about what you want to do. And it could be that some of these formats actually lead you to the same answers. There is some overlap in the results, basically. So don't feel like you need to tackle all of these things in one go, because most probably you'll gravitate towards one of them And that will set the direction of the type of goals that you want to set. So number one, what motivates you? And this is such a tricky thing to answer. Why is it that you do what you do? And with this exercise, we're mainly looking at the why behind things. Why do you do things? And a really interesting book about this is Drive from Daniel H. Pink. And in it, he examines the different motivations that people have. And a lot of it is about the intrinsic rewards that people seek, rather than extrinsic stuff like money or owning stuff. And Pink identifies 3 different underlying motivations for people: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So I'll go over all 3 of them in a little bit more detail. So autonomy. So this is the desire to be self-directed. This is about understanding what parts of your life you like control over. So what are the parts of your life, your work, that you want to be able to decide on? And Pink talks about 4 different aspects of autonomy: tasks, time, team, and technique. So tasks is having control over what responsibilities you have and what you do on a specific day. How does your day look like? Time is having the autonomy to choose how you allocate your hours. Team is being able to choose who you work with. And technique is how you actually perform your tasks. So what tools do you use? What methods do you use? So which of these do you really care about? And for some of you, it might be all of them, and that's fine. For some people, you might say, I mainly care about being able to choose my own hours. I want to be able to work flexible hours, work remotely. But I don't really mind who I want to work with. So understand which of these you care about and what type of autonomy you need in your life. And think about how it lines up in your current role. Understanding what you want here can give you a better grasp of what you're looking for in another role. Then, mastery. So this is the urge to get better and better at something that matters to you. And I think it's the latter part there, what matters to you, that is really important. So I want you to think about what skills you have mastered. Which skills are you proud of having mastered? But also question the reasoning behind it, the motivation behind having those skills. For instance, the ability to write code. So I'm assuming here that most people in this room are developers, and you all want to be able to master writing code. But why? Why do you want to do it? So for some people, it might be about the joy of a specific language, of being able to understand all the ins and outs, all the nuts and bolts of the code itself. The mastery is of being fluent in a very specific language. For others, it might not really be about the code. It's about what they're able to do with it, being able to build something, being able to put something in the hands of users. Every developer will have different motivations of why they are developers. Each of you will have different motivations. And it's easy to assume that the motivations of one person is going to apply to other people as well, but that isn't the case. So understand what skills you want to master, but also why you want to master them. Then purpose. So this is the desire to do something that has meaning to you and is important. So what difference do you want to make to the world? And there's no right answer here. Everyone will have different motivations. For some people, it will be helping others, volunteering, mentoring. For others, it might be money or family or earning money for their family. For some, it might be standing in the spotlight, being able to do talks like this. For others, it might be able to travel and see the world or learning as much as you can. So understand what you want from life and what impact you want to have on the world. What do you want to be remembered by? So what motivates you? So keeping autonomy, mastery, and purpose in mind, what are the things that drive you and keep you happy? And if anything here immediately springs to mind that you're not already doing it, then that should be one of your goals. That's one of the things that you should be working towards. So second exercise. What are your 6 objects? So this is a bit of an obscure one. I'm assuming most people haven't heard of it. So it comes from an exercise that our creative director, Lucy Blackwell, came up with. And it's about finding 6 different objects that represent what you do or what you should do more of. And it's a really good way to get you thinking in more abstract terms to define what you do. And what I love about this is that if you do it right, you can have 6 actual physical objects on your desk at work as daily reminders of the things that you want to do. So in the previous format, we were mainly looking at why you do what you do. And this exercise is all about what you do. So start with writing down all the different things that you do. If you had to explain to someone what your job was, what would you say? What are the 6 things that you keep on having to do? What are the 6 things that are most important to you? And the number 6 is quite important here because it confines you into thinking what really matters to you. And then next, how would you represent these as objects, these concepts as objects? And it's a good way to kind of get you thinking a bit more abstractly. So here are 2 of my objects as an example. So the puzzle on the left is this metal cast puzzle box, and it basically requires a trick to open it. There's no switches or buttons or anything like that on it. And it's basically there to remind myself that each problem that I come across, I really need to look at it from all different angles and perspectives. Often the obvious things aren't going to work, and I really need to look at everything from every angle. It's also there to remind me that while solving problems and puzzles is technically my job, it's sometimes okay not to know the answer immediately. It's okay to ask for help. The second one is a message in a bottle, and it's there to encourage me to always figure out what story I'm trying to share. Basically throwing it into the metaphorical ocean and seeing what happens with it. And it's great if it actually gets read or heard by someone else, but that's not necessarily the point of it. The point of it all is sharing it in the first place and just getting the story out, even if it ends up in a bottle in the sea and nobody ever sees it. So it's about figuring out, so all of this exercise is about figuring out what things do you do that you enjoy, that you think are worth reminding yourself of. So define your 6 objects. So next, what are your personal values? How would you define those? So what values matter to you? And if you think about all the building blocks that make up you as a person, what are the ones that you care about? So in this exercise, it's basically focusing on how you do things, or how you would like to do things. So come up with a list of 5 to 8 values, things that really matter to you. So if someone gave you a report card, what are the things on there that you would like to see? If someone had to describe you in 5 to 8 words, which words would you want those to be? And these values don't need to be things that you're already doing well. It's the ones that mean something to you and that you want to get better at. So here are my current 7 values. And I say current because the things that matter to you do change over time. The things that we strive to be will always change over time. And once you have your values, you can assign numbers to them. So it's pretty much what like Heidi said yesterday in her talk. So how do you currently score in each of those areas? what are the specific ones that you want to improve on? So again, as Heidi mentioned yesterday, spider graphs are really useful for this. And it's really useful to get a bit more of a graphical sense of how you're scoring for each value. And drawing it in this way means that you can easily see which areas you should be working on. Because the end result, well, in a perfect world, the end result is that you get a nice, perfect round circle. Well, octangle or whatever. Well, no, it's 7 lines, so it's not an octangle. Whatever a object with 7 sides is called again. Brain isn't working completely when I'm on stage. Anyway, so yeah, you can see in my case that I think I'm really, really efficient most of the time. It's something that I kind of pride myself on. But my candidness and playfulness isn't as high as it could be, at least not in the work sense. I'm playful enough in my personal life, I hope. But yeah, it gives a good overview of what are the areas that I should be doing more of. So understand your strengths and weaknesses based on the values that you want to see. And these values will be different for every person. For some people, it will be stuff like honesty or loyalty or honor or bravery. It doesn't matter what they are. It needs to be values that matter to you. So exercise 4, what would you tell your past and your future self? So during the panel yesterday, this kind of got touched upon. What's the thing that you would like to tell your past self? So this is an exercise completely about that. So it's about reflecting on how you have changed over time and highlighting to yourself what your own progression and growth has been. So the first step is write a letter to your past self. And you can choose whichever age you want. Could be when you were a kid, could be when you were a teenager, could be 5 years ago. What are the things that you think your past self would have liked to have known? It's a good way to highlight the things that you have learned and done that you think your past self would have appreciated or maybe would have benefited from knowing. And the next, let's flip it around. What would your past self write back to you? So what things would they be surprised about? What things would they want to remind you of? For instance, what did you as a kid want to be when you grew up? Because it might be that something in there still actually rings true, and it's good to remind yourself of it. So in my case, one of the things I wanted to be as a kid was an actor or singer, being on stage. And that isn't really true now. I doubt I'd be good as an actress or a singer. I'm never going to be able to do that. But at the same time, part of what I love being able to do now is, standing here on stage and being able to give talks. There's an element there that matches what I wanted as a kid. So if past me could see me today doing a talk like this, I think they'd be quite happy. Finally, write an actual letter to your future self. So put it in an envelope, put a date on it, and don't open it again until that date. So what would you write yourself in 5 years' time? What about 10 years' time? 20 years' time? What are the things that you would like to remind your future self of? So all of this is to understand where you come from and where you're going, putting your growth and progression in perspective. So those are 4 different retro formats that you could try to do to get a sense of who you are and what you like to do. So just thinking about this stuff, though, about why, how, and what you're doing, or what you want to do, that isn't enough. So based on these exercises, you next need to try to come up with tangible goals. So hopefully these exercises will have given some inspiration of goals that would be good for you. An analogy that I quite like, though, is approach your goals like you would a new city. So what are the main things that you would like to see and do? So you might be the type of person that plans out every single thing and has this very specific timetable of the things that you need to visit, making sure that you hit every spot of the stuff that you want to do. Or you might be the type of person that mainly gets their recommendations from their friends or people that they know online. Or you might be the type of person that doesn't plan anything and just wanders around the city, waiting to see what happens, leaving it all up to chance. Regardless of which approach you take, you need to make sure you see the things that you want to see, that afterwards you don't have regret. Because especially that last one of just wandering around and seeing what comes your way, it might be really useful to come across like the hidden gems of a city. But there's also a chance that you basically just get stuck in the suburbs and don't end up seeing anything interesting at all. So do your research and figure out what you want from your goals. And you don't know what you don't know. So go to more conferences, read more articles, talk to people, get a mentor. Figure out what the things are that you might want to do. And always reflect on them and figure out if any of the things that you've read or heard should be one of your own goals. So I want you all to do something at the end of today. Look back over the entire weekend and think of at least one single thing that you'll add to your goals. So next, short-term retrospectives. So first, examine a shorter period. So this really depends on you. So some people will want to do this every day. For others, once a month might be enough. So figure out a regular pattern of when you want to do them and stick to it. It's also okay to experiment, though, with this. Try doing them once a week first. If that's too much or too little, you can always change it. Next, take notes. Just taking the time and reflecting isn't enough. Write down all the things that you come up with. Could be on paper, could be digitally, doesn't matter, as long as you keep track in some way or form what you're thinking of. And then revisit your past notes. So what are the things that you came up with last time? What are the things that you came up with a year ago? Did you do them? So make sure that you are reminded of the things that you once said you wanted to do. And then find a format that works for you. So when I do retros with my team, often the format is kept pretty simple. We'll have a couple of questions. Most of the time it will be things like these three. So what went well, what didn't go well, and what are we confused about, what do we have questions about? And there are variations depending on the type of retro, but they do tend to be kept to quite confined questions. And this is mainly because of the amount of people that are involved in our team retros. You want some structure and facilitation in how you discuss things that come up during with it. In the case of your own personal retrospectives, though, that structure, that doesn't really matter as much. They're kind of nice as to get a broad idea of this is good, this is bad, and this is kind of like in the middle, mixed feelings. But actually, we want to have as many questions as possible to just get you thinking about stuff. So what I like to do is create as many questions as I can to answer. So all of these are different prompts to get my mind thinking about all the things that happened the past week. So add constantly to these as things that you should be asking yourself. Another thing is to go back to the values that you defined earlier. So did I do anything that was specifically courageous this week? Was there something that I could have been more efficient at? And the useful thing of these values is that because these are the things that I care about, chances are that when things don't happen this way, I'll be more frustrated about it. And it's more likely that these are the things that I want to improve on. And it's also good to remind myself that these are the things that I should be doing differently. And then finally, when reflecting on the short term, the goal is coming up with tangible actions. So things that you can do and take away next week. So of each thing that you add with each question that you answer and you add to your list, you should always question after that, what's the actual action that you could do to do differently next time? So let's reflect, taking the time to look back and looking forward. So next, refactor. And again, before looking at how we can refactor ourselves, let's take a quick look at the reasons behind why we refactor. So why do we refactor our code? And I sort of touched upon this earlier, but I think the main reason to refactor is to avoid technical debt, to avoid the code getting into such a bad state that we can't work effectively with it anymore. So flipping it around and being slightly less pessimistic, it's about keeping the code base in such a good state, and improving its internal design while not changing any external behavior. It's about keeping it in a healthy enough state so that we can do the following. Maintainability, so ensuring that it stays maintainable so that it's easy to fix and change things. And 2, extensibility, so ensuring that it stays extensible and making it easy to add new things. And typically, the refactoring, for me at least, goes like this. There's a code smell, so something that tells me the code isn't quite the nicest way of doing things, that there's something there that I could improve on. I then go and refactor it, making the change of, the thing that I want to change. And finally, I'll normally have tests or something in place to make sure that the changes I made didn't break anything. That externally the behavior, the system still behaves in exactly the same way as it did before. So something that tells me, yay, that thing I did, it was good, and we didn't break anything. So it's this iterative cycle of constantly making sure that the code we have is improving without changing any external behaviors. So how do we extend that same logic to ourselves? So in this case, it's about improving the way we design ourselves, ensuring that it's easy to change existing behaviors or skills, and ensuring that it's easy to add new behaviors or skills. And the main question to ask here is, how do we make it easier to do all this stuff? And for this, we again can get inspiration from how we refactor our code. So let's go back to the refactoring example that I had before. So this is very much focused on code, but we can generalize it. So first, there's a sign that we need to do something. There's something that tells us, look, you need to stop and take a look at this thing. Then you actually go and do the thing. And then finally, you can celebrate. And this loop, that's basically what's called the habit loop. So understanding how this loop works and how you can recognize it and apply it to yourself, I think is one of the main things that people can do to help achieve their goals and change their behaviors. So most of what I'll be talking about comes from this book, The Power of Habit, from Charles Duhigg. And as the title says, it's all about habits. It doesn't just look at the habits of individuals, but also the habits of organizations and societies. And I think when people hear the term habits, they immediately think of things like exercising more, or eating healthier, drinking more water. But there are things that you do in your jobs that are ingrained in you as well, that are habits as well. And understanding these is really useful from a professional point of view. So this is pretty much the same loop as we saw before, only with a little bit more proper terminology. So first there's the cue, that sign or trigger that we need to do something. And then there's the routine, that behavior or thing that you want to do. And then finally there's the reward, that moment to celebrate that you actually did something. And I think that every single goal that people have can be mapped into specific habits. It might not be that obvious initially what habits those are and how they fit into your habit loops, but they can be broken down. And I think there are 3 different ways of how we can use this idea of habit loops to change our behaviors. So I'll explain what each of these means and give examples on how to apply this. So first, adapt existing loops. So this is about recognizing what habit loops you already have that you could extend. So I like to see this as piggybacking on existing habits. So an easy example of this is the advice that dentists give to get people flossing more. So you already have this habit of brushing your teeth. You already have this loop that you go through every single day. And it's not that tricky to add flossing to it as well. So everything else remains exactly the same, but you add an extra element to the routine. Another example is finding time for learning. So one of the people that I was line managing was struggling to put time aside for personal development. In his case, he wanted to read a specific book, and he had put a slot in his calendar to do this once a week. So this was basically the habit loop that he wanted to make happen. So his cue was a calendar reminder, reminding him to stop and read. His routine was the actual reading, and his reward was the fact that he got to learn something. This loop, though, it didn't actually really work. Each time that calendar reminder would come around, he'd be in the middle of implementing something, of coding something, and he didn't feel like he could put that aside to read. And we realized that this was the habit loop that he was already stuck in. So he'd pick up a new feature, he'd then implement that feature, and he'd ship the feature. And then the loop would start again. He'd then pick up another one. So his reading time was basically in the middle of this existing routine of trying to finish a feature. And it was something that he could easily dismiss and then not do, the reading time, that is. So he tried to create this completely new habit, but his old, much more ingrained habit was taking priority. So after talking about it, we came up with the following, and he's now trying this out. So each time he ships something, he celebrates that with some reading. So this way he's not interrupting the loop that he already has, but is extending it with an additional reward. So what are your existing habit loops? What are the behaviors that you keep on doing? And which one of these could you adapt so that you can piggyback on it? What are the things that you could easily add another bit of routine or another reward into? The second way of changing our habit loops is create a new loop with an existing cue. So in this case, we want a cue that doesn't have an associated loop connected to it yet. So a while back, I had this goal of wanting to change the state my mind was in before going to bed, because, anxiety, yay. So trying to disconnect from everything and relax. So previously, the cue of going to bed really wasn't associated to any habit, except for maybe, brushing my teeth and getting ready for bed. So what I've changed now is that whenever I go to bed, no matter how late it is, or how busy it is, or where I am, I'll try to read a book for about 30 minutes, or at least until I fall asleep and then drop my book on my head and wake myself up again, because that tends to happen quite a lot. So inserting a new routine into a specific moment of the day. And another example of this is how I push myself to overcome some of my fears. So I noticed at a certain point that I was very often saying no to things that scared me, as a lot of people do. And I realized I could use that as a cue. So one summer, I forced myself to say yes to anything that came my way and that scared me. And this turned saying yes into a routine, into something that I didn't even have to think about. It removed the option of saying no. It basically was the script that I now had to follow because I told myself so. And because of this, I ended up doing my first conference talk. I appeared in a live coding video, and I experienced a sinking ship simulator. And I know now what to do if a submarine hull breaches, which is really useful knowledge. So start with identifying what cues you already have. So what are the things that happen to you regularly? So initially, just write down a list of everything that you can think of and be specific. So stuff like turning off your alarm clock in the morning, grabbing a tea or a coffee, your keyboard batteries dying, your phone dying, putting on your shoes. What are the things that you do every single day? And also think about your daily schedule. So what catch-ups do you have with specific people? What planning meetings do you have? What are the things that are regular points that happen without fail every single day? So what things exist that you could use as a cue for something else? The third, find new cues and new rewards and for new routines. So this is the most tricky type of habit loop to start, because you're relying on all three parts to be completely new. So the first example is how to get yourself exercising more. So one of the more common tips that I hear to get yourself running in the morning is take out your running gear and put it somewhere so that you can see it the first thing in the morning. So I did this for a while. The thing is, it didn't really motivate me. I'd see my running gear and go, yeah, that's nice, but it's cold outside. Why would I want to go running? So that cue didn't really help me to take action. What did help me, though, was when I started playing Zombie Run. Who knows the game? Okay, a couple of people. So it's a mobile game where you are Runner 5, a survivor of the zombie apocalypse. And during your runs, you basically listen to a story slowly unfold about your character. And it's more like a TV show than an actual game. So right now, I think it just finished season 5. So every year they come out with 20, 30 episodes. So it's like watching a TV show. And the thing is, I should have realized that this type of loop might actually work for me. I was basically the type of person that binge-watched TV shows before that was an actual thing. I remember doing an entire marathon of Buffy and not sleeping for 48 hours. So I know that I can get extremely addicted to stories. So realizing that, I now know that I could use this for other types of habits in the future. So in the case of Zombie Run, I always am kind of excited to go out and run, because it means that I get to experience this next episode. Another example is a very, very meta one. So how to make myself actually keep track of my goals. So this is one of the ideas that I recently had. And one of the things that I love to do is play video games. And I love role-playing games where you get to level up a character and explore different skills and kind of create like your custom character. And I love, I love the whole idea of leveling up. And I realized I could do that same thing to myself. So basic gist is something like this. Turning your goals into points that you can collect. So I've got my warrior character that is basically all about how to get myself exercising more. I've got my bard character, so I'm getting 20 points for just being here. So this is an interesting way for me to visualize how do I get myself doing the things that I want to do more regularly. And it's been a lot of fun trying to come up with like all these little character types for the things that I want to do more of. So when creating new habit loops, think about those 3 aspects. So cue, routine, and reward. And come up with the best combination for you. And also iterate on your habit loops. Because sometimes it does take a while to figure out which cue or which reward works best for you. It could be that some things don't work quite as well as it might for other people. So those are the 3 different ways that I think you can use habit loops to change your behaviors. So hopefully I've given you some ideas in how you can change doing certain things. So let's reflect and refactor. So what do you want to be when you grow up? And I don't think you ever really need to know the answer to that question. But whatever you do, you need to always be thinking about what's next for you. You need to understand who you are as a person and what things you enjoy doing. You need to give yourself the time and the space to figure that out and constantly adapt and change the way you do things. And if there's one thing I've learned, is that all of us are able to do so much more than we initially believe. All of you here are amazing and could do anything you want to do. You just need to figure out what that anything is for you. So I'll leave you with this. You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own, and you know what you know. And you are the girl or guy who will decide where to go. So thanks for listening.